everyone. Welcome. If you could take your seats, we'll start our presentation. On behalf of the First Fridays Committee and the Archives and Special Collections Department here at the university, welcome to the December First Fridays. I'm Linnea Anderson, Interim Archivist in the Social Welfare History Archives. A special welcome to any who are with us for the first time, and thank you to all of you who made it out here in spite of the cold. First Fridays is a monthly series of presentations made possible by a generous gift from Governor and Mrs. Elmer L. Anderson in honor of former Library Director Dr. Edward B. Stanford. The presentations are based on materials in the University Library's Archives and Special Collections. This year's theme is Objects of Desire. Today's presentations focus on the Couts Family YMCA archives and the Sherlock Holmes collections. Following today's presentations, tours will be offered of the caverns. Please meet Lisa Von Drasek in the back of the room after the presentations if you're interested in a tour. Thank you, Lisa. And we are trying something new this year. Some of the Archives and Special Collections staff are wearing Ask Me badges. After the presentation, if you have any questions about the collections or the department, feel free to ask a staff member. Our first presentation is The Soul Desire, a brief history of the YMCA's efforts to protect and reform the souls of individuals and communities. Our presenter is Ryan Bean, Reference and Outreach Archivist of the Couts Family YMCA Archives.
Thank you. The Soul Desire. Mind, body, and spirit. These words emblazoned on an equilateral triangle represent the core values of the Young Men's Christian Association. Today, the American YMCA articulates these values as youth development, healthy living, and social responsibility, though many foreign Ys continue to use the older language. The Young Men's Christian Association has always held the safeguarding and nurturing of the soul as a core emphasis of its work, and today's articulation of this value as youth development the promotion of well-being is not simply a shift in language or an example of mission drift, but rather is an extension of the initial values stated at the YMCA's founding in 1844. Victorian London, the effects of industrialization are fully felt. Society is highly stratified, new wealth is being created, and the nation's youth who are moving in from the countryside are leaving behind their traditional safety nets of family, community, and the church. These youth are finding themselves in a sea of sin and vice, with temptation at every turn. This is the context in which a young draper's assistant named George Williams gathered a group of young Christian men to form an association designed to create safe harbor for their souls. George Williams was an active Congregationalist who found religion shortly before coming to London from the town of Bridgewater. At London's Kingsway House Chapel, he fortified his evangelical faith, and he also frequently attended other houses of worship, bringing him into contact with many men of similar religious persuasion and profession. This fellowship with familiar but different faiths had a major influence on the YMCA, which we'll see later. As a draper's assistant, Williams, like many men in trade, worked long hours and lived in rooms provided by his employer. The typical draper's assistant worked from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Accommodations were sparse, and it was not uncommon to have to share a bed with a colleague. These conditions were endured, hoping for the prospect of advancement or even the possibility of owning a firm of their own someday, as this was an age of self-made men and rapid change, and Williams's faith reinforced his ambition. His religion told him that through personal salvation, the flaws of the individual were overcome. This left the man capable of accomplishing anything. Biographer Dr. Clyde Binfield's analysis of Williams's, quote, almost exasperating single-mindedness with regard to Christian individualism was that the individual was at once a worm in the presence of God, and yet, by total reliance on the merits of his Savior, there was nothing that he could not do. And so this battle between an active evangelical faith, which declared that there was nothing a saved man could not accomplish, and the pervasive temptation to turn to vice, created the environment that allowed for the founding of the YMCA. The Young Men's Christian Association, organized in 1844, began with humble ambitions. The purpose of the association was the improvement of the spiritual condition of the young men engaged in the drapery and other trades by the introduction of religious services among them. Evangelical in persuasion and practice, early YMCA business was conducted via bi-weekly meetings where the members gathered to discuss the work of God in various establishments. The progress was measured by recruitment, and the recruits were measured by their moral character. Young men who wanted to join were scrutinized, and the people in their lives were questioned in order to determine the makeup of their character. Only once they were judged to be both either a convert or member of a Christian church and a professor or possessor of strong moral fiber was a man admitted as a member. And so we see from the outset a linking of an individual's character and their soul. In the beginning, the goal was not the reformation of the soul, but rather their preservation, by providing an alternative to vice. This alternative took the form of morning services, prayer meetings, and Bible classes, which were held in houses of business. This work was quick to show results, and the first report of the London Young Men's Christian Association reported rapid progress in the conversion of men to Christianity. This gave them great hope, and by the end of their first year they had voted to employ a missionary whose duties were to assist the secretary, attend general meetings, assist in conducting services in houses where they want help, and finally to spread the association throughout the kingdom. This first year of work would define 4 fundamental aspects of the YMCA. The first, by having a simple, open-ended goal, here, the improvement of the spiritual condition, they set the stage for individual interpretation of YMCA values. This is important because the implementation of YMCA goals frequently bears unexpected fruit. In this case, by introducing religious services for Christian men, they ended up converting men to Christianity, a welcome but not explicitly sought after goal. Second, by emphasizing the character of the individual versus alignment with a particular denomination, they became, within the context of their time, an inclusive organization that would continue to expand its definition of member. Third, by hiring a minister to spread the association, they became evangelizers of their own work and saw the world as their domain. This promotion ultimately led to what would become a global movement. And finally, by not allowing just members but any man to receive their services, they established the foundation of the YMCA's work with communities. The values of the association firmly established, the YMCA continued to grow its base and began to broaden its work. And in 1851, London hosted the Great Exhibition, and under the glass roof of the Crystal Palace, George Williams promoted the YMCA and distributed tracts, and the world came to learn of the Young Men's Christian Association. One of those learning of the YMCA was an American sea captain named Thomas Sullivan. Hardships associated with life at sea included being shipwrecked in the Antarctic, attacked by pirates off the coast of Brazil, as well as an illness led to his conversion to a more active Christianity in 1833. Taking his message to his community, he began what he called a marine mission at large. Sullivan's work as a lay missionary was interdenominational in nature and involved preaching and distributing tracts on board ships in an attempt to reach men who would otherwise attend no religious service. He called his work social religion, and when he read about the London YMCA, it resonated so strongly with him that he wasted no time in expressing his enthusiasm for the formation of a Y in America. And so, in December 1851, Sullivan founded the Boston YMCA, the first in the United States. Once on American soil, the YMCA expanded ferociously, and within 3 years there were 26 YMCAs who met for the first time to discuss the nature of their work. Like its English counterpart, the American YMCA was very clear that it was not seeking to form a new denomination, but rather to engage the public in Christian work. The debate as to the role of the YMCA in the church began early in its history. In 1856, during the third gathering of the North American YMCAs, the policy was adopted that the YMCA did not, quote, intend that this institution, the YMCA, shall take the highest place in our affections, that we hold this organization as auxiliary to the divinely appointed means of grace, the church, and the preaching of the gospel. The YMCA was, in a sense, establishing a framework for living a Christian life Monday through Saturday, safeguarding the soul for Sunday. At this point in YMCA history, the narrative splinters in hundreds of ways, though each story could be looked at in terms of helping and harboring individuals. And so I will instead select a handful of YMCA moments, the YMCA symbol, its work with youth, and its work abroad, and demonstrate that in spite of the variety of forms YMCA work would take, the preservation and ultimately reformation of the human soul was always a core emphasis. The first example comes from an individual who had substantial impact on the YMCA. Luther Gulick was an instructor at the International YMCA Training Institute. He has many claims to fame, one being that he was the man who in 1891 assigned James Naismith the assignment that led to the invention of basketball. The story goes that there was a particularly rowdy group of young men, and Gulick tasked Naismith to come up with a game which would de-emphasize rough play. After a bit of trial and error, Naismith came up with basketball. Basketball is a perfect example of how the work of the YMCA is designed to reinforce the character or spirit of an individual. Though the values may not be apparent today, the first version of the game was significantly different. There was an emphasis on passing and teamwork, and once a basket was made, a ladder needed to be brought out to remove the ball, thus providing a limit to the pace of the game. Basketball actively demonstrated the need for community cooperation in achieving a goal. It de-emphasized the individual and mended their character in the process. Gulick was a main proponent of the inclusion of physical work into the portfolio of YMCA offerings. Prior to Gulick, YMCAs had experimented with physical education. As early as 1869, YMCAs began to include gymnasiums, and in 1881, the Boston YMCA worker Robert Roberts coined the term bodybuilding. However, it was Gulick who extended and matured within the YMCA these early efforts by incorporating the concepts of muscular Christianity, a Victorian ideal that combined piety and physical health, and in the process crafted an ideal of Christian manliness. Gulick's most enduring contribution, though, and key to understanding the YMCA, the American YMCA, is the symbol he created to embody the movement. The equilateral triangle referenced at the beginning, containing the words mind, body, and spirit. The use of an equilateral triangle demonstrates that an ideal individual contains each in equal measure, not overly pious, brawny, or brainy, invoking the golden mean. However, spirit is at the top. Intellect and strength serve the spirit. This is the American interpretation of Williams's Christian individualism. The health and well-being brought about through attention to the body enabled the young Christian to go out into the world and be a force for good. A keen intellect enabled him to understand his environment and the conditions at hand, innovating solutions for society's ills. And the moral grounding brought about by commitment to faith gave the reason and motivation for living. This is the foundation of the American YMCA, a movement inherited from London but wholly transformed into a uniquely American institution. By extending those initial values of open-ended grounding goals, a focus on character development, inclusivity, and promotion of its programs. The holistic development is well embodied in the second example, the work the YMCA conducts with youth. These programs were created as a result of the YMCA expanding their mission from young men in religious reflection to the holistic betterment of the individual, their mind, body, and spirit. This expanded mission was accompanied by an expansion of who received YMCA services. Over time, various local Ys experimented with engaging their community's youth, mostly boys, though there were some young girls who would have attended YMCA-run schools in Bible instruction. A turning point arrived in 1886 when the Buffalo, New York YMCA hired Miss Ellen Brown as the first Boys' Work secretary. Boys' work and youth work perfectly illustrate the importance of character to the YMCA. It also illuminates the YMCA's view that character could be developed, nurtured, and changed. One book in our holdings that would have been familiar to early Boys' Work secretaries, The Boy Problem, demonstrates this. The boy problem suggests that as a man progresses through childhood, he reproduces the race life of humankind, moving through prehistoric, feral, and barbarian. It suggests that since man has been a savage longer than he has been a Christian, it is only with great care and guidance that boys become men of character. Though theories and understanding of youth development have changed markedly since Boys' Problems release in 1901, what hasn't for the YMCA is the need to nurture and guide youth safely through their development. And so the YMCA creates programs to do just that. One early program, High Y, billed itself as Christian in emphasis, interdenominational in character, and democratic in practice. It was the foundational character building program that spun out complementary programs later known collectively as the Four Fronts Club. These clubs included, in addition to High Y, Gray Y, Junior High Y, and Indian Guides. The Minneapolis Y boasted in 1924 that 14 grade school clubs and 6 High Y clubs and 3 high schools had a total attendance of 38,149 boys. These boys attended meetings with a definite Christian program of character discussion, hikes, debating, clean living campaigns, and leadership and service tasks. This program illuminates the agenda the YMCA had for the youth it worked with. They were not simply seeking to occupy idle hands, rather they had a definite image of an ideal Christian citizen, and they strived to make the boys into that image. Christian citizenship was a primary concern for the YMCA for many years. As they put it, the fundamental objective of the Young Men's Christian Association is the symmetrical development of Christian young manhood. In a sense, Christian citizenship is for youth work what muscular Christianity was for physical education, the embodiment of the YMCA's core values of developing the whole person, mind, body, and spirit. The program centered on Christian citizenship aimed to make attractive and practical to these boys the appeal of the intellectual, physical, devotional, and service basis for character, and affect the boy life of the community. The Y had developed a set of core principles fundamental to their work with boys. First and foremost was the principle of vital Christian emphasis. Christian emphasis would not be satisfied, this Christian emphasis would not be satisfied with the simple adoption of Christian values. Rather, the program worked to create a space for the intentional application of Christian values. The true aim was the development and nurturing of Christian leadership. And a Christian leader shows up very differently in the world than does a good Christian. A popular benediction for closing a High Y meeting sums this brilliantly. Courage for the conflict, patience for the long striving, love enough to forgive, God grant us these as we part. The YMCA's international work is curious and fascinating and the final example. With the goal of the evangelization of the world in this generation, the American Young Men's Christian Association officially began its international work in Tokyo in 1889. Driven by the missionary zeal of the time, the YMCA sought not the promotion of a particular denomination, but rather the promotion of the YMCA in its threefold mission of developing the whole individual, mind, body, and spirit. In doing so, they worked to foster a new breed of Christian citizen, or at the very least, a citizen touched by Christian values. As the Young Men's Christian Association began its work abroad, it continued to articulate its position as secondary to the church. And through its programs, it promoted Christian concepts and offered, quote, legitimate attractions calculated to draw young men. Thus, as in London and America, providing protection from the sins of the world. The primary agent deployed to conduct this work was the YMCA secretary. The secretary was the principal paid position and guiding hand of the YMCA, as well as the primary organizer. Many YMCA secretaries of this period had a strong religious background. In fact, several had intended to join the ministry, while others were recruited from the ministry. The College Association was the primary source for recruiting future YMCA secretaries for work both at home and abroad. As in the city YMCAs, the college YMCAs conducted Bible study and discussed the activities of missionaries abroad. As interest in Christian outreach grew, the college associations organized a series of summer institutes to meet this demand. With the support of the evangelist Dwight Moody, these efforts grew beyond a program and outreach offering and became a full-fledged missionary recruitment tool. By June 1890, nearly 4,000 men had declared an intention to go out to the missionary field as a result of this work. In response to the surge in missionary interest, the college Young Men's Christian Associations in conjunction with the college Young Women's Christian Associations and the Inter-Seminary Missionary Alliance, organized the Student Volunteer Movement for Foreign Missions. The purpose of this new group was to coordinate, solicit, and deliver young men and women for the missionary field. The Student Volunteer Movement was a direct response to a dilemma of how to develop and organize the wonderful uprising of missionary zeal in our colleges so as to make it permanent and to keep it in harmony with existing missionary agencies. Maintaining harmony with existing missionary agencies was of serious concern to the YMCA and the Student Volunteer Movement. They wanted to offer real assistance to the missions and not be a disruptive force. The missions themselves were keenly aware of the flurry of activities surrounding foreign work in the United States. They, like the Student Volunteer Movement, were eager to capitalize on the enthusiasm for missionary work in the United States. By working together, the missions and the YMCA through the Student Volunteer Movement created a process for the organized deployment of American missionaries. Once a Christian base was formed in a community, the missions would request that the YMCA send a secretary to work with the young men. Though Japan was the first, the work the YMCA performed in China was by far the most comprehensive. In 1891, the missionaries of Peking, Beijing, sent an open letter to the International Committee, the governing body of the North American Young Men's Christian Association, petitioning them to enter the field. They requested that the YMCA secure and send to Beijing a young man to develop the full scope of association work. The missionaries of Beijing called for the YMCA to provide services for the Chinese young men in the city. The missionaries believed that what the Chinese want is not the theory of the association, but an object lesson presented by a successful association. In fact, the missionaries felt that the YMCA could ultimately serve as a force to unite the different denominations of China. They speculated that by bringing the different denominations together in China, the YMCA could ultimately demonstrate the strength of Protestantism. 5 years later, in 1896, YMCA Secretary D. Willard Lyon wrote his and the YMCA's first report from China. Working in the city of Tianjin, Lyon describes his initial progress of achieving the YMCA's mission, developing active Christianity in the community. In his report, Lyon describes a pre-existing prayer group meeting organized by the American Presbyterian Mission. The meetings were for the English-speaking Chinese students attending one of the many colleges in the city. Lyon, leveraging his YMCA training, developed the prayer group into a YMCA by implementing an organizational structure. His first step in converting the prayer group into a YMCA was to create a prayer meeting committee. Feeling that they were ill-equipped to facilitate the prayer groups, the students felt that the meetings should be conducted as they had in the past by foreign Christians who were more familiar with and trained in Bible teachings. Lyon, to the contrary, felt that the Chinese boys themselves should undertake the leadership. Initially, the students objected, feeling that the meetings would not be as interesting or profitable if conducted by Chinese, but Lyon urged them forward. He understood the importance of a member-driven organization, and his insistence that the young men take the lead allowed him to report a successful and much livelier meeting than before. Meetings were more active, had full participation, and saw increased attendance. Here, like the example of basketball, the structures of YMCA programs were designed to influence the character of the participants. By putting the responsibility of conducting the business of the meetings on the students, Lyon nurtured leadership and fostered a more intimate, personal faith of the participants. Conversion to Christianity was a primary goal of the North American Young Men's Christian Association during this period. And as the missionaries hoped, the YMCA had begun to serve as a unifying force for Protestantism. They created an opportunity for students to witness testimonials of traveling missionaries in a shared space where the missionaries could interact with the students. Influenced by the evangelistic work of the YMCA, many Chinese students themselves began to go out into their communities. Lyon was very impressed by these Chinese evangelizers who went to the streets to spread the gospel among their fellow students and community members, despite it being, quote, below the dignity of students. This was notable as the students could have lost their government scholarships if officials knew they were preaching the doctrine. Like in America, over a short period of time, the Chinese YMCA witnessed dramatic growth. A handful of prayer groups organized by missionaries in 1890 expanded to 25 city associations and 105 student associations, with a total membership in the tens of thousands by 1912. During the 6th General Convention of the Young Men's Christian Associations of China and Korea, the Chinese association members represented 15 denominations of Protestantism. This interdenominational aspect was the realization of the aspirations of the Beijing missionaries, who first called the North American YMCA to China. Their vision that the YMCA would serve as a unifying force among Protestant denominations appeared to have transpired. This period of YMCA development took place within the context of great political upheaval. The ability of the YMCA to successfully navigate and grow its work despite this upheaval is remarkable. The forces of change at play in China in many ways strengthened the YMCA. With so much change, the YMCA was no longer called to action. YMCA leadership was now actively seeking out ways to enter new areas of work. In 1912, a commemorative report titled 5 Years of Progress, 1907 to 1912, highlighted the YMCA's strong position within China. The opening section of the report is noted as being a year of promise. The revolution of 1911 had the real effects of cutting off financial support for local associations and causing many schools and college closures. This effectively shut down the work of many college associations for a year. In spite of this, the YMCA remained optimistic. The author acknowledges that an organization largely made up of young men could have become hopelessly entangled in the political situation, but credits the wisdom and character of its leaders and members to ensure the non-political stance of the association. The report's list of accomplishments and anticipated future developments indicates that the following year truly could be promising. Post-revolution, the YMCA and other Christian organizations were now open to voluntary religious work. In addition to the YMCA having more freedom to enter locations of its choosing, governors, railway officials, army officers, presidents of colleges, missionaries, and other responsible leaders called upon the YMCA to work with their young men. This new political climate created a landscape where, echoing the beliefs of George Williams, nothing prevented the immediate nationwide extension among all classes of men except sufficient numbers of trained secretaries. The 5 Years of Progress reports open with an illustration that captures the mission of the YMCA better than any report, interview, or illustration I've ever seen. A series of narrowing steps leads to the doors of a church that have been thrown wide open. The altar is visible at the end of the aisle. The pews are empty, as if calling men to fill them. The caption at the bottom reads, "Every action of the association is designed as a stepping stone to the church." The bottom foundational step of the YMCA promotes the succeeding steps of social activities, education, and physical work. These lead to moral development and finally Bible study, which ushers one into the church. This image is the full realization of the YMCA's goals of character development. The YMCA is not just promoting Christian ways, but it is also creating Christians. Simple, ambitious, and open-ended goals that emphasizes the development of an individual's character and the process of improving the lives of communities. In the pursuit of developing spirits, minds, and bodies for over 160 years, the YMCA has been a constant source of innovation and inspiration. However, these innovations are not change for the sake of change, but are rather responses to challenges and barriers in their pursuit to enrich the character of individuals, their pursuit to enrich their souls. Thank you.